The man who once showered her with affection in the open had crept into her sister's bed come nightfall. Valda is already carrying my child. She deserves a proper title. You should voluntarily step down and be her concubine. Everyone expected Emily to break down in rage, but instead, she simply smiled and gave a quiet nod. Ezekiel, pleased, added, "Look at you, being so sensible. Once Valda gives birth, I'll restore your status as my official wife." Emily said nothing. But the very next day, while Evergrace Mansion celebrated a grand wedding, Angelou Mansion was engulfed in flames, burning well into the night. From that moment on, Emily ceased to exist in this world. "Emily, guess what I brought for you?" Ezekiel walked into the room cradling a lantern. Emily took the intricately crafted carousel lantern, her fingers brushing the warm jade handle, identical to the one she had seen in Valda's courtyard. "Did you have this made just for me?" There was a flicker in Emily's eyes, her lips barely steady. Had she not seen the same lantern at Valda's place just yesterday, she might have been touched. "Of course. I specifically asked the craftsman of Linglong Workshop to make it. There's only one like it in the whole capital. You'll absolutely stand out tomorrow." Lantern Festival was just around the corner, a time when young ladies flaunted their lanterns in a silent yet intense rivalry. Everyone knew the finest lanterns came from Linglong Workshop in Jiangnan, especially the carousel ones. Every year, nobles sent servants to place orders ahead of time, but this time, Evergrace Mansion had scooped up the artisans before anyone else. People around the city all believed Ezekiel adored his fiancée to the point of madness. His dramatic shows of affection had always drawn attention. Clearly, everyone thought this was just another grand gesture to please her, but Emily cast her gaze downward, unable to shake the disappointment curling in her chest. Of course, she noticed Ezekiel's brief flash of unease. "You haven't been to my family's estate recently, have you?" she asked casually, though her eyes shimmered with quiet distrust. Ezekiel hesitated before replying with a smile. "I've been tied up planning for the lantern event. I left the house matters to the staff and haven't stopped by." His nonchalance sent a cold shiver through her. He was lying. Marilyn had seen him enter the mansion yesterday, and he hadn't left for a whole incense's time. No wonder Valda suddenly insisted she come admire her lantern. So this was how they wanted her to know. She was no longer special to him, just another name in his life. She couldn't understand it. How could someone who once loved her so deeply change overnight? She could still vividly remember the day 10 years ago when she slipped by the lake and he jumped in without hesitation, the freezing water soaking him head to toe. He held her hand tightly, soaked and shivering, as he whispered, "Emily, as long as I'm here, you'll never have to be afraid." 3 years ago, at a grand family banquet in Evergrace Mansion, he had sworn in front of all the guests, "Emily is the only wife I will ever have. If I betray her, may lightning strike me down." Back then, she thought no love could be deeper than his. Now, that promise was nothing but a cruel joke. Emily clenched her fists, forcing down the bitterness rising in her chest. Could he have had no choice? She didn't want to believe that the man who once risked his life for her would just toss aside his vows so easily. So when Ezekiel left, she couldn't stop herself. She followed him without a second thought. Not even a few steps outside the courtyard, and there he was, running into Valda. Valda bowed politely at first, but the next moment, the fragile-looking girl collapsed straight into Ezekiel's arms, and he didn't even push her away. Instead, he glanced around quickly, then slid his arm around her waist and pulled her behind the rock garden. "Couldn't wait to find me again? Didn't I wear you out last night already?" Ezekiel's voice was low and teasing, his polished, noble demeanor nowhere to be found. Instead, he sounded like someone far less honorable. Valda squirmed in his arms, body brushing against his like she was half flirting, half pouting. "It's always your sister in your heart, not me. How could you ever think of me when you're always chasing after her?" Seeing her cry, Ezekiel quickly softened. "Come on, don't be mad. I was just sending her a lantern. You're really upset over that? After last night, I thought you'd be satisfied. Or are you saying you still want more?" "Stop it, Ezekiel," she whispered, voice breathless. Not far off, Emily stood frozen in place, her face drained of all color. She stumbled back to her courtyard like a ghost, quietly dismissing every servant. Once she was alone, a single tear slipped down her cheek. Her lips were pale, her expression empty. On her dressing table, the white jade hairpin Ezekiel gave her years ago still sat where she had left it. He'd given it to her 8 years ago. Back then, her mother had just passed, and Madame Fleu had swooped in with her own daughter, Valda, to take over the household. From that point on, Emily became invisible. Her father had only 2 daughters. While she was the eldest, she was never the favored one. No matter how often outsiders praised her as the perfect Angelou heiress, graceful, educated, kind, it didn't change the fact that inside the estate it was always Valda who stood in the light. But Ezekiel didn't care about any of that. He always stood by her, shielding her whenever she needed it, always thinking of her before anyone else. Right after her coming-of-age ceremony, he had gone to his mother and begged for their engagement. In public or in private, she had always been his treasure. She thought she was lucky, believed she'd found someone worth spending the rest of her life with. But in just a few short years, that devoted man vanished, replaced by someone she could barely recognize, a liar full of empty words and betrayals. Emily cried until her chest ached but never made a sound. Eventually, her tears ran dry, and her heart went with them. She sat motionless until dawn. At first light, she opened her jewelry box and took out a jade pendant. Half a stick of incense later, she had changed into a man's robe and made her way to a tea house where she met someone she'd once saved, separated by a screen, out of sight. "Miss Angelou, have you made up your mind?" Emily gripped her teacup, her voice steady. "I want to fake my death and disappear. Can you make that happen?" The man gave her a slow smile. "All right, but you'll need to wait. 2 months from now there'll be an opening. Just know, once we start, there's no going back. Think it through." Emily pressed her lips together tightly. Somehow she found the nerve to pull a dagger from her sleeve. With one quick motion, the blade sliced her palm. Blood dripped onto the table, staining the tea red. She said, each word heavy and clear, "With my blood, I make this vow. I won't regret this." By the time she got back to Angelou Mansion, dusk had already settled in. The entire estate was buzzing in preparation for the Lantern Festival that evening. Not without reason, whoever's lantern won tonight would get a dowry gift straight from the palace. To any unmarried girl, that prize was tempting beyond words. "Miss, you're back at last." Marilyn was practically pacing holes into the ground outside the courtyard. Her young mistress had only said she was stepping out for a while, but it was already evening and still no sign of her. Too scared to leave the estate in search, she could only wait, nerves fraying. "Miss, everything for the festival is ready. Second Miss has come by to rush you several times already, and young Master Zion even sent someone to wait outside." Emily just gave a light hum and let her maids help her change. Tonight, she wore a soft blue surcoat over a pleated skirt patterned with misty green blossoms. A sheer shawl of pale smoke blue draped around her shoulders. Her frame was delicate, skin smooth as porcelain, and she moved with an understated grace. Marilyn followed behind, holding a flower lantern. The moment they stepped out towards the front courtyard, Emily spotted Valda waving at her in the distance. She started walking over, but the smile at her lips faded quickly. Valda was dressed to the nines tonight, moon-white robes with feathered shoulders, a silken pink and cream gown underneath. Her waist was trim, and her figure could turn heads with ease. Her maid stood behind her, also holding a lantern. Though wrapped in a black cloth, Emily recognized it instantly. It was the same kind Ezekiel had once gifted her. The two sisters got into their sedans and the procession set off. The Lantern Festival took place beneath the imperial city walls, overseen by several noble ladies from the palace. Emily lifted the curtain of her ride to look out, just in time to see Ezekiel ride up beside them. He leaned down slightly to meet her gaze. "You look stunning tonight, Emily. You'll surely win." She lowered her eyes to hide any flicker of expression, replying plainly, "All the families are bringing their best. I may not come out on top." But Ezekiel seemed oddly confident. "As long as my sister's carrying the lantern I gave, victory's certain." He didn't even realize he looked back at Valda's carriage right after he spoke. Emily looked down at the lantern resting by her feet, its cloth cover still in place. A wry smile tugged at her lips. When they arrived at the city gates, Emily stepped into the circle where the young noble ladies were gathering, her lantern in hand. Eyes turned to her immediately. I heard Zion got Lantern Pavilion to custom make a running horse lantern this year. Looks like Angelou's eldest will be the star tonight. Well, no surprise there. She's always been Zion's favorite. Listening to the chatter around her, Emily lowered her gaze, the light in her eyes dim. Let them talk. Once Valda unveiled her lantern, they'd see clearly what kind of man Ezekiel really was. As always, the court ladies would first say a few ceremonial blessings, and then the young ladies would go up one by one to display their handcrafted lanterns. The Angelus held a powerful position at court, so naturally, the daughters of their house followed immediately after the noble ladies and princesses had taken the stage. As the head daughter, Emily should have gone up first. But of course, Valda insisted they go together. "Sister, let's go up together." With that, she grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her toward the platform. Emily didn't argue. At this point, whether she went along or not, she'd still be blamed for something. Up on the palace wall, the Duchess of Evergrace stood beside the imperial consort, watching the stage unfold. "That must be the eldest Angelou girl, right? The one your son's engaged to? And she's the one holding that carousel lantern, isn't she?" The consort had been close friends with the Evergrace Duchess since girlhood, so she paid special attention to Emily. The Duchess simply nodded with a smile. The marriage between the Angelus and the Zions had been arranged long ago. It didn't really matter to her whether it was the older or younger sister. As long as her son was happy, she didn't mind indulging him with a few tricks tonight to bless the engagement. When the court lady announced the lantern unveiling, both Emily and Valda removed the black cloths covering theirs. But to everyone's surprise, the rumored exquisite carousel lantern wasn't in Emily's hands. It was Valda who held it. As the candle warmed the base, the carved pattern spun slowly and the projected images danced across the palace wall, telling the story of The Phoenix Seeks Its Mate, a well-known romance. Nothing unusual at first. It was common for an unmarried young woman to long for love. But here's the thing. Ezekiel had publicly said just 2 weeks ago that he was designing a themed lantern based on The Phoenix Seeks Its Mate for the woman he loved most. So if Valda had that lantern in her hands, didn't that hint that she, not Emily, was the one he truly loved? Valda's eyes gleamed with smug satisfaction as the lantern caught everyone's attention. "Sister, I'm so sorry. The handmaid must have mixed them up. This one was actually a gift from Ezekiel," she said in mock innocence. "Didn't mean to steal your moment." Emily stared coldly at her, not like she didn't know what Valda was playing at, making a show out of embarrassing her in front of the entire capital. Without a word, she lifted her own lantern and stepped down from the stage, refusing to give Valda any more oxygen. "Then make sure you hold on tight. I've heard it's worth more than gold. Would be such a waste if you let it fall," she said coolly. As the final lantern lit up the night sky, the festival officially came to an end. The imperial consort named Miss Angelou as the event's winner. But funny enough, she didn't specify which Miss Angelou. So the second they stepped into the gates of the Angelou estate, Valda dropped to her knees in front of Emily. "Sister, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it. Please don't be angry," she begged. Ezekiel walked in right after them. His eyes lingered sympathetically on Valda's trembling form. "Emily, I was the one who gave the lantern to Valda. If you're upset, take it out on me. Don't make things hard for her." Emily lifted her eyes to Ezekiel, a dull ache pulling at her chest for no reason she could explain. "I haven't even said a word since I stepped in. How am I making things hard for her? If you're so worried, just tell her to get up. I sure didn't force anyone to kneel." Ezekiel had never seen this side of Emily before, sharp, unrelenting, and for a moment he was at a loss. He turned quickly to Valda instead. "Valda, just get up first, all right?" But Valda didn't move. Her back straightened as she addressed Emily. "Please, elder sister, help me this once. I was born without much to rely on, not like you who's been promised such a fortunate match. I'm asking you to give me the royal dowry today's winner gets, so I might have something to lean on, so I won't suffer once I marry." "Emily," Ezekiel added, his voice unusually soft, "just let Valda have it. Once we're married, I'll speak to the palace and get another one for you. How's that? He didn't even hesitate, just picked his side without thinking. Emily looked at him, each word cutting into her heart. He'd told her before, hadn't he, that he'd give her anything she wanted. But now the horse lantern Valda got was supposed to be hers. Now even the royal dowry that should have gone to her, he wanted her to give that up too. What did he even see her as now? She stayed silent, and Ezekiel, noticing it, felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't resisted when Valda pouted and played cute, gave her the first lantern he made, despite what he'd promised Emily. And now he was forcing Emily to give up her rightful spot. But seeing Valda shivering in the cold wind, slender and kneeling, his heart still leaned toward her. He wavered, but in the end, he still sided with Valda. Emily, you're the elder sister. Letting your sister have her way, that's how it ought to be. Emily shut her eyes. Coldness settled in her chest. Since the day Valda had come to the Angelou household, people had kept telling her she was the older one, she should concede. Even now, her own fiancé stood there saying the same thing. Let Valda have it. Why? Just because she was younger? Fine, you want it, take it. She opened her eyes again, one tear rolling down, but her gaze was as calm as still water. She looked at the girl kneeling on the floor with an unreadable expression. Valda, on the other hand, brightened with joy. She stood and happily held on to Ezekiel's arm, giggling. Ezekiel, didn't you hear? Sister said she's giving it to me. Ezekiel smiled and reached out, gently ruffling her hair, as if Emily's sadness didn't even exist. As Valda passed by Emily, she leaned in close and whispered softly, Sister, to thank you, tonight at midnight, come to the attic room. I've got a nice little show for you. With that, she swept off smugly. Marilyn helped Emily back to her courtyard. The night air was cold as water, but nothing could match the chill in her heart. At midnight, Emily went alone to the attic. It was usually used for summer gatherings and mostly abandoned during winter. Carrying a small lantern, she stepped inside and immediately caught the sound of Valda's laughter. Ezekiel. Emily stopped right there. Her lantern trembled in her hand. In the side room, Valda wore only sheer gauze, playing around with a man. She hooked her arms around Ezekiel's neck. Their eyes locked, and as he leaned down to kiss her, she shyly pulled away. Ezekiel's too impatient. I've got a new game in mind tonight. Valda stood up, her tone casual, and slipped behind the screen to change. A few moments later, she stepped back out, draped in a crimson gown that clung to her figure, alluring and sharp like a flame in the dark. Ezekiel blinked in surprise, then his brow furrowed. That's your sister's wedding dress. Your mother left it for her. She said she'd only wear it on our wedding day. Why are you playing around with it now? Valda didn't even look fazed. She straddled his lap, traced slow patterns on his chest with one finger, her gaze teasing. What's the big deal? It's just a dress, not like it'll fall apart. Plus, don't you always like it when I wear Emily's things? This time I'm going all in with her wedding gown. Doesn't that make it more exciting? The red silk slid aside, revealing porcelain skin. Ezekiel hesitated, something flickering in his eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe doubt, but it didn't last long. He gave in without much of a fight. Outside the door, Emily had to clamp her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. She waited and waited. It was nearly an hour before the noises quieted. With her lantern in hand, she stumbled out of the building like a sleepwalker, and just as she turned into the garden path, she ran into him. Fresh off his betrayal, Ezekiel was caught off guard. Cold sweat broke down his back the moment he saw her. He hadn't expected to see Emily there of all places, not at that hour. She looked at him, face unreadable, voice flat as she forced the pain back down. I couldn't sleep, felt uneasy, so I came out for some air. What about you, Ezekiel? Why are you here? His tension eased just a little. For a second, he really thought she knew. He straightened up and replied, Your father asked me to stay and discuss court matters. We talked late into the night. It's cold out, don't catch a chill. Let me walk you back. He reached out to support her. But the second his hand touched her, a wave of nausea surged up uncontrollably. Emily turned away and threw up on the spot. Emily, are you all right? I'll call the doctor right away. Ezekiel looked panicked now, stepping toward her. Emily braced herself, squeezing his arm to steady her voice. No need. Just a little dizzy. Help me back to my quarters. That'll do. He didn't suspect a thing and gently led her back toward the courtyard. The trees rustled, dry branches scratching in the wind. Alone again, Emily lifted her hand to her cheek, surprised to find it dry. No more tears left. Her fingers brushed against the bracelet her mother had left her. She had made up her mind. Before faking her death, she'd break off the engagement. Everyone knew that Grand Chancellor Booth had no son, only 2 daughters. But Emily, the elder, had never felt like part of the family. It was Valda, though born of a stepmother, who had always been the apple of Booth's eye. So when Emily walked into the dining hall and saw Booth, Flu, and Valda cheerfully sharing breakfast like a perfect little family, she wasn't even surprised. She greeted them properly, and a servant quickly set a place for her. Emily lowered her head and quietly ate her porridge. She knew what to expect. "Your sister won first place at the Lantern Festival yesterday," Booth announced. "I've already let her collect the reward from the palace." Emily didn't respond. The sweet porridge in her mouth had never tasted so bitter. Before Booth even finished his sentence, Lady Flu's voice interrupted from the side. "Since the dowry's going to Valda anyway, why not just let her marry in Emily's place? After all, back then the Angelou and Zion families said it was a marriage alliance, but they never specifically named who." Emily felt her chest tighten. Everyone in the city knew the Zion family's eldest son was meant to marry her. If Valda suddenly stepped in, wouldn't that scream to the whole world that she'd been dumped? For an unmarried woman, a reputation like that meant only 2 options: shave her head and join a temple, or kill herself to prove she was innocent. Clearly, though, neither Booth nor Lady Flu gave a damn about her reputation or her life. "That may sound like a clever plan," Booth finally said, "but it still depends on whether the young master of Zion agrees. It's not that easy to switch brides just like that." He was tempted, of course. If his younger daughter could marry into Evergrace Mansion, it'd be a win. Anyone with half a brain could see Ezekiel was going places. As long as he didn't slip up, a top court position was his for the taking. Still, in the end, Ezekiel had to be the one to decide whom he wanted to marry. Emily stayed silent through the entire meal, quietly picking at her food. How absurd. Her entire future was up for negotiation, it seemed. Everyone could weigh in, except her. After breakfast, she returned to her courtyard. Marilyn, who'd been holding it in all morning, finally snapped. "Master's being so unfair. That dowry was clearly promised to you, miss, and now not only does he give it away to second miss, he's actually thinking of marrying her off in your place?" Emily gave a sad, hollow smile. Ezekiel used to treasure her, and look how quickly that changed. Her father had barely looked at her since she was a child. Why expect anything now? Marilyn's heart clenched at her lady's pale and listless face. She suggested softly, "Miss, the plum blossoms in the back garden have started blooming. Do you want to go have a look?" Emily stopped in her tracks. Those plum trees were planted by her mother before she passed. Booth's first wife, the one who supported him all the way from a nobody to a top minister. She died the year he became chancellor. Not many left in this house remembered her at all. Taking the path toward the rear garden, Emily slowed when she heard voices coming from the pavilion. It was Valda and Lady Flu. "Valda, even if you can only be a concubine, you must get into the Evergrace Mansion," Lady Flu said firmly. "Mother, I'm not about to rank beneath Emily," Valda huffed. "If I'm going to marry into that house, it'll be as the main wife." She'd always had the upper hand over Emily in this household. No way she'd settle for less now. "Don't act like being a concubine is the end of the world," Lady Flu said calmly. "What matters is ending up as the Zion lady in the end. I started off as your father's concubine too, and once Mindy died, I took her place." Valda wrinkled her nose. "But Emily's not like that dead woman. I can't just sit around waiting for her to die, can I?" "You really think Mindy died of illness? A legitimate wife who lost favor. If we wanted her gone quietly, shouldn't take much effort on our part, right?" Emily nearly collapsed at Flu Madam's words. A wave of memories from her younger years came flooding back. No wonder her mother had taken countless medicines, yet never got better. No wonder the moment her mother passed, father wasted no time in making Flu Madam his new wife. So her mother hadn't died of illness. She'd been murdered. Pain and rage churned in Emily's chest. She couldn't hold back any longer. Storming into the room, she slapped Valda hard across the face. "You dare hit me!" Valda stared at her in total shock. In her mind, Emily was always the quiet one, the kind who swallowed every grievance without a fight. "So what if I did? You and your mother are pure poison. I should thank myself for not ending both your lives right now." Fury boiling, Emily yanked Valda by the collar and yanked a hairpin from her own bun, pressing its sharp tip against Valda's throat. "Flu, madam, I'll ask you one last time. How did my mother really die?" It finally dawned on Flu Madam that Emily had overheard their earlier conversation. Her gaze dropped to the sharp pin at her daughter's neck, face turning white. "Emily, calm down. Your mother did die from illness. Yes, I had thought about poisoning her, but I didn't even get the chance. When I got wind of it, she was already too far gone. Ask the master yourself. After having you, her health never bounced back. No amount of tonic helped." "Liar, you just said it yourself. You got rid of her. Now you're trying to cover it up?" "I'm not lying. Just let Valda go, will you?" "Do you really think I won't do it, sister?" Valda sneered. "If you kill me, won't Ezekiel be heartbroken?" Hearing his name, Emily's grip on the hairpin tightened. Flu Madam glanced at her daughter in a panic, signaling her to stop provoking Emily. But Valda only smiled wider, leaning in to whisper by Emily's ear. "Never thought you'd be this pathetic. All that love for Ezekiel. Yet you pretended nothing happened when I wore your wedding gown to sleep with him. Why not keep pretending now? Let's see, shall we? Who will Ezekiel pick this time, you or me?" Emily's eyes turned icy cold. Just then, a silhouette appeared in the distance. Valda's expression changed in an instant. "Ezekiel, help me. She found out everything. She's trying to kill me." Ezekiel froze, his mind spinning. "Emily, listen to me. It's not what you think." Without a word, Emily gripped Valda's hair tighter and moved the pin to that smug, pretty face of hers. "Then explain it to me," she hissed. "Tell me, were you not involved with Valda? Or did you somehow manage to keep your hands off her?" The blood drained from Ezekiel's face, and with every word she said, he looked closer to crumbling. I was wrong, Emily. I shouldn't have. But the apology came too late and meant nothing now." Emily shut her eyes, every inch of her face painted with hurt. "Ezekiel, it's over. Let's end the engagement." Emily had been holding back those words for far too long. Now, finally, she let them out. But Ezekiel instantly pulled her into a tight embrace, tears streaking down her face as he refused to let go. "No, Emily, you can't break off the engagement. We're meant to be together forever. I can't live without you. I was wrong, but we can't end this, please." He was holding her so tightly, it hurt. That pain snapped her mind clear again. She wanted to get rid of all this precisely because Ezekiel just wouldn't let her go. Just last year, she had made polite conversation with two strangers, and Ezekiel had blown it way out of proportion, almost stirred up a citywide drama. For months after that, every time she left the house, there was someone tailing her, sent by him. "I'm tired. I want to rest." Her voice was calm, but firm. On hearing this, Ezekiel quickly reached for her arm. "Let me walk you back, Emily. I'll stay outside your room. I'll wait right there." She wanted to say no, but the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't even bring herself to fight him anymore. He escorted her back to her courtyard, then just stayed outside the door, silent and unmoving. No matter how many people came to talk to him, he wouldn't budge. The next morning, Emily's maid told her he'd been standing there the whole night, not eating or drinking. Emily let out a soft sigh, changed her clothes, and told them to open the gate. As soon as Ezekiel saw her, he rushed over like a child seeking forgiveness, eyes full of desperation. He grabbed her hand and slapped it onto his own cheek. "Emily, if you're angry, hit me all you want. It's all my fault. Just please, don't leave me. You're the only one I've ever loved. Without you, I'm nothing." Emily stared at him coldly. She'd heard it all before, again and again. If someone really loved you, would they be sneaking around with someone else? "Emily, I swear, if you stay with me, I'll do anything you ask. Anything." She gave him a mocking smile. Promises from him were worth less than dirt. "All right then, if I told you never to see Valda again, ever, could you do it?" He froze for a second. The truth was, he had feelings for Valda too. Emily was graceful and poised. Valda was lively and sweet. Deep down, he didn't want to give up either. But if forced, he had to choose. Only Emily wasn't touched by his answer. Instead, she turned toward the corner of the room with bitter sarcasm. Is that good enough for you, little sister? Valda, already delicate looking, now looked even more pitiful as she wept quietly. Elder sister, she cried, I've loved Ezekiel for so long. Please, let me just stay by his side as a maid. Emily scoffed inwardly. Perfect match, weren't they? And she was the villain crashing their love story. Her gaze sharpened as she looked at Valda. Even if staying means I ruin your body and you'll never be able to have children, you're still willing? Valda flinched, but then nodded with frightening resolve. As long as I can stay with Ezekiel. Emily shifted her eyes to Ezekiel. What about you? You'd really let me do that to her? Ezekiel looked torn for a moment, but then hardened. You're the one I'll marry. If you say no, then no one will ever bear my child. To most noble ladies, those words would have sounded like high praise, but to Emily, they felt more like a slap in the face. The boy who used to promise her forever under the osmanthus tree, who once fetched dewdrops from an old temple outside the city just to steep her tea, was completely gone now. Ever since Ezekiel assumed she wouldn't actually break off their engagement, he just stopped pretending to care. At first, he at least had the decency to drop by Emily's courtyard to sit for a bit before going to see Valda. Now, he paraded through the city with Valda by his side on horseback, not even bothering to be discreet. The gossip around town was relentless. Master Ezekiel's getting bolder by the day, Marilyn fumed. Yesterday was old Madam's death anniversary. Miss always recites sutras all night for her. He used to at least come burn a few sticks of incense every year. Now he won't even spare a thought. Emily smiled faintly, but there was no warmth behind it. Men, they're all the same. She used to think Ezekiel was different. Turns out, no such thing exists. The next day, Emily disguised herself as a young man and went back to the same tea house. The matter Miss Angelou asked me to look into has some updates. There's good news and not so good news. Tell me the good news first. Whatever flu Madam once said about her mother's death, Emily needed to confirm it herself. The good news is, your mother died of natural causes. Her health never recovered after childbirth. It was bound to happen. Emily bit her lower lip. What's the bad news then? She'd only asked about her mother's passing. Since nothing unusual turned up, what bad news could there be? The bad news is, Miss Angelou, you might not actually be the Prime Minister's biological daughter. The teacup slipped from Emily's fingers and clattered onto the table. Even after returning to Angelou Mansion, she was completely out of it. No wonder Booth never liked her. No wonder he never spared her mother a glance. Turns out she wasn't his daughter at all. Emily tried to smile, and somehow tears rolled down her cheeks. After she wiped them away and forced herself to stay composed, Ezekiel strolled into the courtyard with Valda on his arm, both of them all smiles. Marilyn spotted them through the window and looked like she was ready to beat them both out the gate. Emily stopped her just in time and stepped outside, calm and collected. Ezekiel presented something to her, like he'd just won a prize. Emily, look, I went out to the countryside and caught this fox myself. Its fur is really soft, perfect for making a little cloak for you. Inside the cage, a snow-white fox bared its teeth at her. Valda chimed in with her usual fake sweetness. Sister, Ezekiel worked so hard to catch this one. I begged him for it, but he wouldn't give it to me. Emily looked at the fox without emotion. I don't like using animals for stuff like that. Valda's eyes immediately lit up. She'd been eyeing that fox since the moment she saw it. If Ezekiel hadn't been so stubborn, she would have already turned it into a pair of gloves for winter outings. Catching Valda's obvious interest, Emily added casually, but since it was given to me, let's call it a kind gesture. Marilyn, go release it back into the wild. Marilyn didn't hesitate. She went straight over, took the cage from Ezekiel, and walked off. Stop it, Valda blurted out, rushing to stop Marilyn, then turned to Emily. Sister, it's such a waste to let the fox go. If you don't want the fur cloak, why not give it to me? I promise I'll treasure it. Before Emily could reply, Ezekiel frowned deeply. We agreed it was a gift for Emily. Don't be unreasonable. Feeling wronged, Valda stormed back into the courtyard, tears brimming, and vented to Mrs. Flew. Mother, are you really going to sit by and let me end up as some nameless maid? Mrs. Flew looked just as troubled. Of course, she wished her daughter could marry into the Evergrace family properly. But Ezekiel wouldn't budge, and Emily wasn't making a fuss either. It just wasn't that simple. We'll have to take a risk. Make it so Ezekiel has no choice but to marry you. A few days later, gossip rushed through the capital. Miss Valda of the Angelo family had fallen into the lake while boating and had been saved by young Master Zion. Rumor had it they'd gotten too close during the incident. Father, Valda has no face left to show. Please just give her a white silk ribbon so she can hang herself in front of the Angelou gates. At least that way your reputation stays intact, said Valda bitterly. Mrs. Flew broke down on the spot, clutching her daughter, sobbing hard. Valda, my poor girl, why do you have to suffer like this? If you die, then your mother will go with you. Booth rubbed his temples, his headache growing. He had indeed considered letting Valda marry Ezekiel in Emily's place, but these things had to be discussed properly, with a reasonable excuse, not blown into a public scandal. Enough. Do you want the whole city talking even more nonsense? Booth hardly ever raised his voice, so the mother and daughter instantly quieted, left only sniffling in the corner. Ezekiel then entered with a deep bow, kneeling before Booth. He'd overheard Valda threatening to die and rushed in, full of urgency. This is all my fault. Today I come to beg to marry the second miss, to protect her reputation. Booth looked at him carefully. You want to marry Valda? Fine, but what about Emily? After all, Ezekiel personally asked for Emily's hand in front of His Majesty. There was no royal decree, but the emperor had approved it in person. Ezekiel glanced at Emily with guilt weighing heavy on him. I wish to first dissolve the engagement with the eldest miss, then marry the second miss. Next year, I'll welcome the eldest miss into the house, so neither is wronged. In this dynasty, noblemen couldn't marry two wives at once. Even taking a concubine had to wait a year after the wedding. Originally, Ezekiel planned to marry Emily according to the engagement and bring Valda in a year later. Valda was still young, waiting 2 years wouldn't hurt. But now, to protect Valda and salvage the Angelou name, he had to give up Emily. Emily, please don't worry. I'll marry you next year, I promise, and I'll raise your status to my true wife. You'll manage the household and the accounts. He really believed, since she loved him so much, she'd understand his struggle. Emily sat still in her chair, fingers gripping the armrest so tightly they'd turned pale. She thought she'd long stopped caring enough for him to feel hurt, but now listening to him say all this so casually, her heart felt like it was being eaten alive. So what you're saying is you're demoting me from wife to concubine? Seeing tears streaking down Emily's face sent Ezekiel into a panic. He dropped to his knees and swore an oath on the spot. Emily, I swear to you right here, you will always be the only wife in my heart. No one will ever outrank you in my household, Ezekiel said, desperation in his voice. Emily forced down the bitterness in her throat, her lips curling into a mocking smile. And what if I refused to break off the engagement? Valda collapsed to her knees, sobbing so hard she could barely draw breath, her whole body shaking. Sister, I swear, even if I marry into the Evergrace mansion first, I wouldn't dare go against you. Once you enter the household, we'll be equal out in public, but inside the home, you're the wife, I'm the concubine. I'll listen to everything you say. Just give me a chance to live, she cried, her voice hoarse. Ezekiel's gaze was filled with pity as he looked at Valda. His voice softened to a barely audible plea. Emily, Valda's carrying my child. If I don't marry her, she'll have nowhere to go. She really won't make it. Emily's heart felt like it had caved in. He talked so much about Valda having no way out. Did he ever stop to think what she was supposed to do? Fine. He'd made his choice. She'd just make it easier for him. She wiped away a tear that had slipped down her cheek, helped Marilyn up, then looked around at the others in the hall. I agree. Let's call off the engagement. Seeing things go his way, Ezekiel turned back to her, full of promise. Emily, just wait. Next year, after Valda gives birth, I'll bring you home, I swear. Emily said nothing more. Once back in her own courtyard, she tossed the woven token Ezekiel had once given her straight into the basin. A pair of knots entwined like hearts, a piece of clothing stitched with promises that now meant nothing. From this moment on, we go our separate ways. We're done. The news about the union between the Angelou and Evergrace families spread through the capital overnight. Everyone had thought the charming young Master Zion would marry the much-admired Miss Emily of the Angelou family. But it turned out the bride wasn't the one folks had expected. It was her sister, Valda. The entire capital buzzed with gossip. Emily's name was on every tongue, either with sneers or sighs. Strangely, no one in the Angelou family seemed to mind the bride swap. Aside from Emily's own courtyard, the mansion was buzzing with excitement over the wedding. They were picking only the finest items for the dowry, rushing to get the wedding gown custom made, and even making sure the fire basin she'd step over on her way out of the mansion was just right. While preparations were in full swing, Emily slipped out in a man's outfit. At the tea house, she didn't expect that the second person she'd meet beyond that ghostly stranger would be her cousin. Cousin? She asked, surprised. She hadn't expected the person her friend called over to be someone she actually knew. In her mind, her cousin had always been quiet and kept to himself. Since when did he get involved in all this? From now on, anything you can't do out in the open, he'll handle for you, the mysterious man said before walking away. Her cousin didn't explain. He just looked at her calmly. I've arranged everything. On the day Ezekiel marries, 2 weeks from now, you'll die in a fire at the Angelou mansion. Only a pile of bones will be left. Emily lowered her eyes. All right. Dying on Ezekiel's wedding night, it felt like the perfect end to this mess, the last bit of revenge she had left. Once everything was in place, she returned home, only to find yet another delivery from Ezekiel waiting for her. As the wedding crept closer, he seemed to send more and more gifts each day. Jewels, pins, hair ornaments, all kinds of expensive trinkets. She returned every single one of them without a second thought. On the eve of the wedding, Ezekiel showed up at her courtyard once again. Emily, why won't you accept the things I sent you? Lately, he had been swamped preparing for the ceremony and barely had time to see her. All he could do was have his servants deliver some trinkets to her. But she hadn't taken a single one. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Emily was in the middle of packing up her books, volumes she'd collected over the years. She could die in the fire for Ezekiel, fine. But her books? No way. Without even lifting her head, she said coldly, "You're about to be my future brother-in-law. It wouldn't be proper for me to take gifts from you. You'd best keep them for Valda." Ezekiel knew she had a point, but seeing all those books scattered across the courtyard made him uneasy. They're your favorites. Why are they all out like this? Emily paused at that. Weather's been decent these days. Thought I'd air them out a bit. Ezekiel couldn't see anything off at first glance, but something just didn't sit right. All he could do was offer reassurance. Emily, trust me. By this time next year, I'll come and marry you. He didn't know this would be the last chance he'd ever get. The next day, Emily went to the largest bookstore in the city, handed over a hefty sum, and had them print a stack of flyers. She then gave a shop assistant 10 taels of silver to make sure the leaflets were delivered to Evergrace Mansion first thing the next morning. At dawn, the bridal procession arrived at Angelou Mansion, and Valda, in full wedding attire, bid farewell to her parents. She stepped carefully over the fire basin before being helped into the bridal sedan. Madame Fleu wept helplessly as she watched her daughter leave. On the streets, the grand parade, the red-dressed horsemen, firecrackers, and festive cheers drew everyone's attention. As the groom, Ezekiel found himself not in joy or sorrow, but stuck somewhere in between. Holding the red silk ribbon, he helped Valda into the sedan chair, but his eyes involuntarily wandered toward Emily's courtyard. While every corner of Angelou Mansion buzzed with celebration, that little courtyard was dead silent. It gnawed at him. On the journey back, he rode tall and proud on his horse, passing by crowds that looked on with admiration and envy. But inside, Ezekiel couldn't shake the growing tension in his chest, until someone in the distance suddenly yelled about a fire. He instinctively tightened his legs around the horse, bringing the whole procession to a halt. The matchmaker rushed over, whispering anxiously, "Young Master Zion, delaying the timing's not good. Let's keep going." Feeling the urgency from every direction, Ezekiel pushed aside the uneasy knot in his heart and carried on. Soon, joyful cries rang out at the gate of Evergrace Mansion. The bride and groom have arrived. Excitement surged all around, and amid the cheers, Ezekiel finally forced himself to relax. Under the watch of palace officials, he and Valda bowed 3 times, sealing their union. The crowd clamored to see the couple enter the bridal chamber. Under the red veil, Valda's face turned slightly red. She tugged gently at Ezekiel's sleeve. Ezekiel, there's so many people. I'm nervous. He frowned slightly, not offering comfort, but said instead, "From now on, just focus on taking care of yourself and the baby. Once Emily moves in, she'll handle the guests and manage the household. It's not your responsibility." Valda clenched her teeth lightly under the veil, but still answered quietly, "Yes, Valda knows now. She'll listen to you from now on, I swear." Ezekiel yanked his hand away and snapped coldly, "Remember, in this house, she's the wife. You're just a concubine. Make sure you act like it." Valda, her face twisted with anger, sat stiffly at the edge of the bed. She couldn't say a word. Ezekiel turned and walked out to the front courtyard, where the guests were raising their glasses and laughing, toasting his wedding. Suddenly, someone burst in from outside. "Young master, Angelou Mansion is on fire." Ezekiel froze. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. "What did you say?" he barked, grabbing the messenger by the collar. The Prime Minister's residence caught fire. It burned down an entire wing. The eldest Miss Emily didn't make it out. Ezekiel felt a sharp pain rise in his chest like a rush of blood. He shoved the boy aside and stumbled out the gates in a panic. As he reached the front gate, a man holding a bundle of flyers blocked his path. These were sent by Emily. She said they were a wedding gift for young Master Zion. Why won't they let me in? At first, Ezekiel didn't even look at him, but when he caught the name Emily, he spun around and practically tore the flyers from the man's hands. Scrawled across the top was a poem. It was Zhuo Wenjun's Heartbreak Farewell. "The strings have snapped, the mirror cracked, the morning dew has faded, youth is gone, the song of white hair mourns our parting. Eat well, don't worry for me. This river runs wide, and from here I say goodbye forever." When Valda finally heard, all she knew was Ezekiel had seen something outside the gate, then suddenly coughed up blood and collapsed. By the time she arrived, the estate's physician was already treating him, and he slowly opened his eyes. My lord, are you all right?" Valda cried, clutching him as he came to. As soon as Ezekiel saw her face, he shoved her away roughly. "Shut up. Don't call me that. I'm your brother-in-law. Only your sister had the right to call me husband." The crowd, high-ranking nobles who'd come for the wedding, stood nearby, whispering. Everyone in the capital had heard about the mess between the Angelou girls and Evergrace's heir. Now, seeing it play out, Ezekiel engaging the elder sister, then marrying the younger, yet still hung up on the first, some people looked amused, others plainly disgusted. "Look at me," Valda said, grabbing his arm in desperation. "We've already bowed and married. Don't talk nonsense." But before she could say more, Ezekiel seemed to remember something. He tore himself away, shoved through them all, and jumped onto a horse without warning. "Go after him," Valda screamed at the guards, pointing wildly. "If anything happens to him, I'll hold all of you responsible." Chaos erupted at what was supposed to be a grand wedding, turning it into a complete farce. Only with the intervention of the Evergrace princess did the situation calm down somewhat. Meanwhile, Ezekiel galloped headlong toward Angelou Mansion. The closer he got, the thicker the smoke billowing in the sky. He kept telling himself, maybe it wasn't Emily's courtyard. Even if it was, maybe she wasn't hurt. There were so many servants. Someone must have gotten her out. Clinging hard to those thoughts, he charged forward until he reached the mansion gates. Everything was in chaos. People rushed around, hauling water, dragging buckets, shouting instructions. He grabbed the nearest person and demanded, "Tell me what happened. Where's the fire? Where's your young lady?" The servant recognized Ezekiel immediately and answered without hesitation. "Young master, the fire broke out in the first Mrs. quarters. As for her," his voice trailed off and sorrow settled on his face. Ezekiel shook his head in disbelief, breaking into a run toward Emily's courtyard. He'd walked this path countless times, but today, every step felt like slogging through a nightmare. It had never felt this long, this unbearable. When he reached the gate, he saw Marilyn kneeling on the ground, clutching a charred body, sobbing uncontrollably. Miss. Ezekiel froze. His legs refused to move another inch. His chest tightened, his thoughts tangled beyond recognition, and his mouth couldn't form a single word. Tears began to stream down his face without warning. Emily. He staggered forward, falling to his knees beside the body. That horribly burned hand still wore a jade bracelet, the keepsake left by Emily's mother, one she never took off. When Marilyn noticed Ezekiel in his wedding robes reaching out for the bracelet, she shoved him back with everything she had. Stay away from her. You don't get to touch her, not anymore. Leave. He fell onto the ground, vision blurred, shaking his head violently. No, this isn't real. You're all lying. She's not gone. She can't be gone. The Angelou servants rushed to restrain him. Lady Flew had fallen ill from the shock, and Lord Booth was nowhere to be found, having shut himself away. When people from the Evergrace house arrived, they forcefully dragged Ezekiel back. Now, on what should have been her happiest night, Valda sat beside her unconscious husband, her face pale, looking more like a widow than a newlywed. Everything was wrong. Ezekiel had lost it over Emily. If the Evergrace princess hadn't ordered medicine to be forced down his throat, he'd still be kicking up a storm. At dawn, before the sun had fully risen, Ezekiel woke to find Valda lying next to him. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her up roughly. "Where's Emily? What happened to her?" Valda yelped in pain, her wrist aching from the sudden yank. She had only just managed to lie down after watching over him all night. "Ah! Sister," Father asked Cousin Niall to handle her funeral. "If you want to go see her, I'll go with you." Cousin? What cousin? Valda also found it odd. Niall had barely shown his face around the Angelou house. Not really someone involved in family matters. But he happened to visit yesterday, just as everything fell apart. With Booth bedridden, Niall stepped up, saying he'd take care of Emily's arrangements, and Booth, too drained to argue, handed it all over. By the time Ezekiel and Valda arrived, Niall was busy directing others as they prepared Emily's body. Valda peeked into the coffin, shrugged at the effort. A burned corpse is a burned corpse. What's the point of tidying it up? Ezekiel didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at the coffin, grief written all over his face. Why did the fire start in her quarters? That question wouldn't leave Ezekiel's mind. Out of the entire Angelou estate, why only hers? Niall gave his folding fan a casual tap and raised an eyebrow at Valda. His stare crawled over her skin, making her shiver. "What are you looking at me for?" A smirk tugged at the corner of Niall's lips. "Well, since this whole mess came from you, dear second miss, who else should I be looking at?" Ezekiel immediately grabbed Valda by the arm. "You set the fire in Emily's courtyard." Valda stared at him wide-eyed. "Ezekiel, are you insane? How could it be me? We were together the whole day yesterday. When would I have found time to sneak off and start a fire in her place? Maybe you didn't light it yourself, but didn't you send that brazier, the one you'd stepped over, to the eldest Miss's courtyard after you went out yesterday?" For a split second, doubt flickered in Valda's eyes. Ezekiel didn't miss it. His fingers gripped her chin tight, his gaze ice-cold. "Answer me. Was it you?" Face scrunched in pain, Valda finally snapped. "Fine. Yeah, I sent the brazier. So what? I just wanted to mess with her head a little. I didn't think it would start a damn fire. It was just one brazier. How was I supposed to know it set the whole place ablaze?" She sounded so sure of herself, her tone defiant. Niall only shook his head. "You can't say it like that, second miss. It's fire season, and the manor's full of willow trees. One spark is all it takes. Even a fire stick could have caused an inferno. That brazier you sent, yeah, that's what started the blaze in the eldest Miss's courtyard. So basically, you got Emily killed." Ezekiel's hand slipped from her chin to her throat, the pressure building fast. Valda clawed at his arms, gasping, eyes bulging. "It's true and not true," someone said. "Sure, the fire happened because of second miss. But from what I heard from the maid, Emily could have made it out. She had a chance. She just didn't take it." Ezekiel's grip loosened, and Valda dropped to the floor, coughing and dragging air back into her lungs. Why? Why would she do that? He turned and looked at the coffin. Confusion blanketed his face. Why would Emily stay behind? Well, maybe you should ask young Master Zion. Wasn't it the eldest miss who was supposed to marry you? Not her sister? Niall said calmly, his voice low. What would drive a woman so far that she'd rather die than face it? Must have been something that broke her completely. And then, like a blade slicing through fog, a line of poetry stabbed into Ezekiel's mind. Jinshui rushes on, farewell forever. She already wanted to die when she wrote that. She meant every word. I also heard Second Miss went to see her sister late last night. Who knows what she said that made Emily want to die? Ezekiel turned back to Valda, his stare frigid, heavy. She instinctively staggered back. Trembling, Valda faced him. Ezekiel, I swear I didn't say anything to her. Please, don't do this. Let me go. Please. But letting go? That was never Ezekiel's way. He grabbed her hair and yanked her forward, forcing her down in front of the coffin. Look her in the face and tell me exactly what you said to her last night. Valda looked up and came face to face with Emily's charred, unrecognizable face. She shrieked, her scream tearing at the air. I know what Second Miss told Our Lady, a servant girl said, stepping forward. Just when the tension was at its peak, Marilyn stepped forward. Dressed in plain white, one of her eyes swollen from crying like an almond, she knelt in front of Emily's coffin. After bowing her head to the ground, she finally spoke up. Last night, Second Miss came to see Miss Emily. She told everyone else to leave, but I was worried for Miss, so I stayed outside and listened quietly. I heard Second Miss talking all proud, saying once she married into the Evergrace mansion, she'd be the legitimate wife. Once she had a child, that child would be the heir. Even if Miss Emily married in next year, she'd just be a concubine. She said Miss Emily wouldn't stand a chance against her. The words cut deep. Ezekiel could picture how crushed Emily must have been hearing that. She was supposed to be his wife, his only wife. Now she was made to feel like a nobody, bullied by her own sister. How was she supposed to take that? Valda, Ezekiel hissed through clenched teeth, staring her down. And before the engagement was broken, Second Miss kept rubbing it in Miss Emily's face, always bragging about how much Master Zion liked her. During the Lantern Festival, she even invited Miss Emily to her courtyard just to show off. She kept saying she'd steal Zion away from her one day. Marilyn spilled everything without pause, laying out each cruel act Valda had committed over the years. The more Ezekiel listened, the colder he felt inside. Emily had known about him and Valda for a long time. She never said anything, still hoping he'd come back to her. But in the end, he let her down completely. Maybe that's why she chose to stay in the fire, because of him. Her death was on him too. Ezekiel, please, don't believe her. She's lying. I didn't do any of that. Valda begged, grabbing at his sleeve as she knelt on the floor. Marilyn had clearly expected Valda to deny everything. Her expression steady, she looked around at the crowd and bowed deeply to Ezekiel. Every word I said is true. Whether you believe me or not means nothing. I only said what my miss never got the chance to. Then she stood up and slammed her head into the coffin. Blood poured out instantly, and she died where she fell. Niall, moved by her loyal heart, immediately ordered her to be buried with Emily, honoring her with the title of Third Miss. Valda sat frozen, unable to say anything. Marilyn had used her death to speak for Emily. What defense did Valda have now? As for Ezekiel, he was racked with guilt, refusing food or water and staying beside Emily's coffin day and night. But on the day of the funeral, Niall had him thrown out. What are you doing? I have to send Emily off. Why won't you let me? Ezekiel shouted, trying to fight his way back. Niall's eyes were cold. By custom, you're Angelou Mansion's son-in-law now, a guest. Emily was your fiancé's elder sister. You can bow, but you have no right to follow her to the grave. Ezekiel's eyes were bloodshot. Watching the funeral procession ready to leave, he grabbed Niall's collar, shouting, I was engaged to her. We had a betrothal. I have every right to be at her burial. But Niall peeled his fingers off and calmly dusted off his robe before speaking. Sorry, but you and Emily have long since broken off the engagement. You're just her brother-in-law now, a guest. Evergrace Mansion has its own mourning tent by the roadside. You can go light a couple of incense sticks there. Ezekiel had nothing to say. He stared at his empty hands, remembering the day Emily called off the engagement. She had returned every single thing he'd ever given her. So that was it. She'd already decided to let go back then. That day, Emily, the eldest daughter of the Angelou family, was laid to rest. Ezekiel, second son of the Yongning Duke's household, lay motionless on a street in the capital they had once strolled down together, watching snow fall quietly around him. There was no going back now. Out in a country courtyard on the outskirts of the city, Emily stretched and leaned against the windowsill, watching a man in the middle of the lake casually fishing. Ever since faking her death to escape that life, she'd been hiding here. The days were quiet, but they gave her peace. No rules, no pressure. She could sleep until noon, drink alone under the moonlight, things she'd never dared do when she was Emily. But as Skylark Yan, she could finally enjoy the world as it was meant to be. Skylark Yan, that was the new name she'd given herself. Like a bird flying free, she wanted to roam far and wide, never tied down again. "Hey, don't you get bored fishing in the middle of the lake every single day?" she shouted toward him. The man had shown up 3 days ago with the excuse of protecting her, but so far all he did was sit in that boat and fish. Never caught anything either. Just as she finished speaking, a splash. Suddenly, a long-tailed carp leaped from the water, scattering droplets everywhere. The fish thudded onto the deck, writhing twice before going still, a hook hanging from its mouth. Emily's eyes lit up and she rushed out, fetching the fish with a big grin, her eyes narrowing into crescent moons with delight. "Nice catch, Ailes Gongzi. I'm going to cook us something good." And off she ran, the fish tucked in her arms. Soon, a steaming bowl of pickled fish soup sat between them. Emily picked up her rice and started eating with gusto. She couldn't help but notice how proper the man across from her was, even more uptight than Ezekiel. He took his time chewing, posture perfect, like he expected a servant to appear and refill his bowl any minute. When she'd first rescued him a year ago, she'd never imagined they'd someday sit together like this, eating fish in the same courtyard under different names and lives. Still, apart from being cold and a little too composed, this Ailes man didn't really have any flaws. "Here's the latest update. Take a look." He handed her a slip of paper, concise, straight to the point. Among the brief notes was one that stood out. Ezekiel had filed to annul his marriage less than a month after the wedding. A smirk tugged at Emily's lips. Ezekiel really hadn't changed, still heartless as ever. Whatever else Valda had done, she was carrying his child. And he still had the nerve to stir up trouble like this? If he really went through with the annulment, what other option did Valda have except to take her own life? "I've already told people in the city about what really happened back then. The truth should be all over the capital soon enough." The man finished his last bite, dabbed the corners of his mouth with a napkin, calm as ever. Emily nodded. She had no objections. People like Ezekiel and Valda needed to face consequences. She wasn't going to die with a cloud of rumors following her just because she pitied them. Besides, after what Marilyn had done in front of those two, they needed to at least pay the price. News spread through the capital like wildfire. News so wild it knocked everyone off their feet more than the recent wedding of Ezekiel. People couldn't stop talking. Turns out, the younger sister seduced her sister's fiancé and got herself pregnant before the wedding. That wasn't enough for her. On the wedding day, she allegedly pushed her sister to her death in the middle of a fire that left her body beyond recognition. The gossip hit every tea house and alleyway by morning. Though names weren't dropped, it didn't take much brainwork for folks to put it together. Everyone pieced it back to the Angelou sisters and Ezekiel. Suddenly, it all made sense why the noble Mr. Zion wanted to dump his new wife right after the wedding. No one saw it coming, but now that everything added up, people couldn't stop shaking their heads. The Evergrace second miss might look soft and delicate, but who would have guessed she'd go so far, snatching her own sister's man and getting knocked up before marriage? "She's ruined the Angelou name," someone muttered, "and Evergrace still took her in? They must be blind." Meanwhile, Valda sat crying to her mother, Madame Fleu, trying to hold herself together. "Mother, Ezekiel has lost it. Now he wants to get rid of me. If he does, how am I supposed to survive?" She never imagined that after Emily's death, Ezekiel would spiral into something like a ghost of a man. He didn't care about anything anymore, just whispered revenge for Emily like the world owed him something. But Emily's death wasn't her fault. Why was he taking it out on her? Valda, you can't depend on Ezekiel anymore, Madame Flu said, firmly gripping her daughter's hands. Focus on keeping that baby safe. As long as you've got that child, the Evergrace family has no choice but to keep you. You get that? She knew perfectly well that once the child was gone, Evergrace Mansion would toss Valda out faster than yesterday's trash. With all the rumors about Valda killing her sister flying around, even a duchess with a soft heart wouldn't let such disgrace stain her house. I've arranged for someone to get a special medicine. Make Ezekiel drink it. Once he can't have more children, your son becomes his only heir. That way he won't dare touch you. Madame Flu's voice dropped. Eyes dark in thought. She only had one daughter. No matter the cost, she'd do anything to protect her. Valda slipped back into the Zion mansion with the secret pouch of medicine tucked tightly against her. As soon as she stepped in, Ezekiel turned to her with a soft smile. If this were before, she'd have run into his arms in a heartbeat. But these days, with him constantly yelling or lashing out, she didn't dare get too close. Valda, I went too far the other day, Ezekiel said, voice calm. I wasn't in my right mind. I said terrible things, did even worse. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? For a second, he sounded like the man she used to know, gentle, graceful. Her eyes welled up as she fell into his embrace, craving the warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. That night, dinner was set in the small kitchen, just the two of them. They sat across from each other, drinking quietly. Ezekiel filled their glasses. This one's to say sorry, he said, raising his cup toward her. Valda hesitated, holding the cup to her lips for a moment. Ezekiel, I'm still pregnant. Maybe I shouldn't. Why not use tea instead? She reached for the teapot, but Ezekiel gently stopped her hand. This wine, I specially had someone get it. It's fruit wine, really mild. Even kids can drink it. Don't worry, Valda. Valda stared at her cup, then remembered the drug she had just slipped into Ezekiel's. Gritting her teeth, she picked up the cup and drank it all in one go. It really was light, barely any alcohol, but the moment she finished, Ezekiel's gaze shifted, cold, almost twisted. He let out a dry laugh and threw back his own drink. Ha ha ha. Emily, I finally got justice for you. Valda and I were going to join you. Valda froze, eyes wide in horror. She tried to spit the wine out, but it was too late. They tried to kill themselves, both of them? Emily stared at Niall in shock. She'd figured Ezekiel might go crazy and cast Valda aside, but dragging her to die with him, that she didn't expect. Yeah, shame they didn't drink enough. Someone found them just in time. But Valda's baby didn't make it, and she's lost her mind. And Ezekiel. Niall hesitated and glanced toward Dom. Emily waved her hand in front of his face. Don't stop. What about Ezekiel? Niall gave a crooked little smile. Someone drugged him too. He's not going to be a man anymore, let's just say. Emily raised her brows. Exactly who set that up wasn't hard to guess. That pair really brought it on themselves. Anyway, forget about them. I came today with good news. Remember how Alicia sent me to dig into your mother's past? Well, something big came back. Emily sat up straighter. Ever since learning she wasn't Booth's biological daughter, she'd been wondering, who was her real father? She couldn't believe Niall had found the answer so fast. The next morning, their quiet little home on the outskirts welcomed two elders, both dressed in elegant robes, one with snow-white hair, the other walking slowly with a cane. Emily stared in disbelief. My child, we're your grandparents, the old man said, then pulled her into his arms, tears slipping down his face. You don't know how much you look like your mother. Back when she was your age, you two could have been twins. He stroked Emily's hair, eyes full of sorrow and longing. Finally, Emily pieced it all together. Her mother, originally the daughter of a wealthy merchant in Jiangnan, had been doted on by her parents. They didn't want her to suffer, so they took in a live-in son-in-law, Emily's real father. After they got married, the whole family traveled to the north on a business trip. But they were ambushed by bandits on the way. Her father was killed, and her grandparents fell off a cliff. Her mother, alone and desperate, was saved by Booth. Booth, seeing an opportunity, pretended not to care about her past and proposed marriage, saying he didn't mind that she had already wed once. Desperate and grieving, her mother agreed and followed Booth to the capital. Little did she know her parents had survived the fall. Not only that, They ended up becoming some of the biggest merchants in the north. They'd spent all those years searching for their daughter with no luck until Niall sent word, and finally, both sides connected the dots. Booth had taken her to the capital all those years ago. Emily, hugging her grandmother, couldn't stop the tears. She was reminded of how her mother once held her like this. If only her mother could have seen this, known that her parents had survived after all, how happy she would have been. Watching Emily lean against the elderly couple's shoulders, Niall gave Dom a pat on the back. Well, pretty slick of me, right? How are you going to thank me, huh? Get lost. Niall clicked his tongue. This guy always had that ice-cold expression, but his eyes were glued to the girl like he couldn't look away. Not subtle at all. I'm serious. When are you planning to tell her who you really are? She could leave with her grandparents any day now. You might not get another chance. Dom's lips pressed into a thin line, his brows drawing together. She's leaving? His voice was flat, but his eyes betrayed him. He couldn't even look at Emily. Yeah, I'd already planned on traveling once all this was over, Emily said, her words quiet but steady. To the south, to the north, just to see the world. But now that I've found my grandparents, I'll be heading to the north with them first. They've missed out on so much time with my mother. They're getting older too, and they need someone around. Dom looked up at her. So, you're really going north? Emily nodded. That was the plan, at least for now. What came next? Even she wasn't sure. All right, when are you leaving? She hadn't expected him to take it so easily, and that made her chest tighten, though she couldn't say why. The morning after tomorrow. Grandfather still has a few things to take care of in the capital, so I'll go into the city with them tomorrow to help out. You're going to the city? Aren't you worried someone might recognize you? I'm Skylark now, not Emily. If I don't even have the guts to face people, how am I supposed to fly high as Skylark? Emily parted from Dom and went with her grandfather to handle the final business matters. The Attenborough family owned quite a few shops in the capital, and this trip was all about selling them off. The old man was getting on in years, and with the north so far from the capital, it was just easier to let them go. Wearing a veil, Emily quietly stood by his side. Many were interested in the Attenborough properties, but only a few could actually afford them. Surprisingly, one of the potential buyers was from the Evergrace mansion. Emily frowned when she saw the steward in front of her. She hadn't expected to run into someone from that place. The man kept sneaking glances at her, too. There was something oddly familiar about this veiled girl, but he just couldn't place where he'd seen her before. After the deal was done, the steward returned to the mansion to report back. But as soon as he stepped outside, he spotted Ezekial looking utterly wrecked. And in that moment, it clicked. She looked just like her, Emily, the Angelou family's eldest daughter, the one everyone thought was dead. Hearing her name, Ezekial instantly snapped to attention. The steward quickly shared what happened, every detail. Suddenly, the dull light in Ezekiel's eyes sparked back to life. Not bothering to change out of his clothes, he ran straight to where the steward had seen her. But she was already gone. Still, Ezekiel refused to let the lead slip away. He started asking around about the Attenborough shops, digging for any clue. When he learned the family would be leaving the capital the next day, he didn't hesitate. He rode out of the city that very night and waited on the main road leading north. At dawn, Emily and her grandparents set off for the north under the protection of their servants. Just as they left the outskirts of the capital, the path ahead was suddenly blocked. Emily, come out and see me. It's me, Ezekiel." Spotting the symbol of the Attenborough trading house, Ezekiel jumped in front of the carriage, refusing to move no matter how the servants tried to hold him back. Inside the carriage, Emily frowned. Who would have thought that just a brief meeting with Evergrace Mansion's steward yesterday would end up leading Ezekiel straight to her? Old Mr. Attenborough was about to get out, but Emily stopped him. Some things, in the end, had to be faced by herself. She lifted the curtain, revealing a face far too familiar. Ezekiel froze, eyes full of shock and joy. "Emily, I knew you weren't really gone. Please, come home with me." Emily avoided his reaching hand and answered coldly, "Sir, please show some respect. I am Skylark, raised in the far north, and I've never met you. I don't know who this Emily you're talking about is. You must be mistaken. Ezekiel had tried too hard to find her. He wasn't about to let go now. Emily, I know I was wrong. I swear I'll do right by you from now on. Please, don't turn me away. Refusing to give up, he clung to the side of the carriage. Emily was just about to order someone to drag him away when suddenly, an arrow came flying from nowhere. In the blink of an eye, a rain of arrows followed. The older couple inside the carriage were shielded, but Emily and those outside had to scramble for cover. Emily instinctively turned to dodge. One arrow missed her by inches, but the next she couldn't avoid. Just when she thought it was over, Ezekiel appeared out of nowhere and threw himself in front of her. He took the arrow straight through his shoulder, blood quickly soaking his robes. Through gritted teeth, he still smiled at her. Emily, don't be scared, I'm here. Emily caught him as he stumbled, blood dripping at her feet. Right then, Dom and Niall arrived with their men. The ambushers in the woods were quickly captured. They confessed without even being questioned. Flu Madam had ordered them to kill Ezekiel, trying to avenge Valda. Later, Emily arranged for Ezekiel to be taken back. The wound was only in his shoulder, serious but not fatal. Dom personally escorted Emily and the others all the way to the north. Only once they reached their destination did Emily realize this man was the famed King of the North everyone was talking about. Soon after, Emily took over her grandfather's business and became the wealthiest merchant in the region. And eventually, the richest woman in the north married its king. The wedding, they said, had the whole land celebrating. As for Ezekiel, once he recovered, he joined the army and headed south to the furthest corner from the north. Maybe they'd never see each other again in this life, lives passing each other like stars, distant, unseen. A gust of wind flipped the page of a book, like how every life has its turning page, the end.